thank you. Thank you for the introduction of the Professor Luis, and thank you for Emilio and Jesus, Professor. Yeah, thank you all. And let me start. Okay. Today I will to introduce some Chinese contemporary architects in the recent 40 years. Three architects in the use of the bricks. That I think my major is to the materiality of bricks, the key to understanding contemporary Chinese architectural design practice. So, this is the poster you ever see, and this is the typical the material use of the three architects, the Wang Shu, the Liu Jiakun, and the Zhang Pengju. This is 3 persons. Yeah. As we say, each architect is the bricks of the contemporary brick to construction all of the phenomena of the world architecture practice. And this wall is my office in our School of Architecture. And you can see there are quite different the light and the darken, and in between is the same space. Yeah, this is the works of the Professor Zhang Pengju. Yeah, you will see next month. Let me start. Today I will to introduce 3 architects and through 5 parts. The first is the bricks as a contemporary material, and I think a brick as a Euro material when architects to construction or to build architecture. So you can say such as Leipzig, Kang, and the Scabar are all of architects to construction build a building. We use some materials to construct it. But these 3 architects in China is worked based on 3 different cities. Wang Shu is in Hangzhou, Liu Jiakun is in Chengdu, and Zhang Pengju is in Huhot. But in China, there has a very different things, but most similar to Barcelona in Spain. There has a line to divide the countries 2 parts. One part is the heavy peoples and the well economics and somehow. In the east of the line, this line is called the Hu Huanyong line. Yeah, from the Heihe to Aihui. Yeah, in the east, this part of our country have his 94% peoples, but in the west of the line, nearly 6% peoples. Yeah, this is a very quite different ways, and Wang Shu is in the populations is quite density, and Liu Jiakun and Zhang Pengju is nearby the lines between the east and west, yeah, and the south and north. So this is quite different situations we to know and understanding the difference between the 3 architects. But as we see, this is the triangles to the cities, and there has some central point of our nations. There is the original of our we use the bricks to construction. This point is called Yanshi. That's my hometown. Yeah. and nearby the Luoyang, yeah, almost 4,000 years before, there has big cities in our original construction used bricks. This is the archaeological site, and this is the basement. We used bricks to construction buildings. And here is the palace in the site. We used the bricks. So up to now, we have the traditional ways to make the earth, mix the water, and by fire, to make bricks and cubes to build the buildings, our traditional buildings. This is the way to use the more than 1,000 years ago, up to now. So we can see why the traditional use of the material is the contemporary material. Why is contemporary material has his traditional characteristic, and we developing the techniques to construct the buildings by the bricks, so different ways. But I think it is similar to all architects, not only in China but also in all around the world. And the domes in the different ways, and the bricks to combine to make the walls, to make the pillars, to make the domes, all the types of the space we built, even big cities. This is Xi'an, cities in through almost 2,500 years ago, and then this is the 1,000 years ago in Tang Dynasty. So we can see the pagoda and the historical areas. Up to now, he's remained in the Xi'an city. And in the historical photographies, we have to see the pagoda and the residence in the city is all built by brick. So this picture is in the box that Christoph Alexander spoke. In this book, he writes, let I read it. In a sense, everyone knows what order is. But when I really ask myself what is order, in the sense of deep geometric reality, deep enough so that I can use it, and so that is able to help me create life in a building, then it turns out that its order is very difficult to define. So I think the use of our to face each traditional materials, such as the wood, the bricks, and the stones, maybe, that's a question, is the contemporary question for each architect. And this is the book that Christopher Alexander wrote by his late years as an architectural theory, The Nature of the World. He says, I feel I am talking about is unitary. It is fitting in the singular, which comes from the whole. It arises in us, but it originates in the wholeness which is actually there. Real feeling, true feeling, is the experience of the whole. So I think bricks that we start to use it to build a building, it's the order, start of the order, but it's also the origins of the order we made. So we can use the bricks or stones to make a huge production. Or this is the Great Wall in the Mongolia parts. Yeah, it's almost 1,000 kilometers high. We call the this one. But I think it is also the techniques about the great traditions of the Europe, the Greeks, the Romans, that we see these years in A Coruña. This has different ways to use the bricks to build in our architecture in the different parts of the architecture. So, let's read from the tradition to our reality. I will introduce 3 architects in contemporary China. Wang Shu. Yeah. He is born in 1963 and won the British Architect Prize in 2012. This is his prize introduction. And we noticed in this part, yeah, the office named the reference, the approach, and a major builder takes one based on spontaneity, craft skills, and cultural traditions. Wang Shu spends a number of years working on building site and learn traditional skills. The firm utilized his knowledge in everyday techniques to adapt and transfer the materials of contemporary projects. These unique combinations of traditional understanding, experimental building tactics, and intensive research define the base of the studio's architectural projects. This is Wang Shu, which he got his master's degree. Yeah, this paper. In 1988. And then in 2000, he got his doctorate degree in Tongji University. And this is his first book. The name is The Beginning of Design. Yes, Wang Shu's beginning of design is used brick in the decorations of our artist studio, Chen Mo Studio, in 1997. We can see this is the use of the bricks to make the decorations of the studio, but not the whole buildings. And then he designed a very modernity buildings in Suzhou. This way. And this is the quite famous buildings and make him got the prize. Is the Xiangshan Campus, China Academic of the Art in Hangzhou. We can see this is a surface or facade of the buildings that's quite modernity. But in this detail, he used the very traditional materials, just like brick, to make his facade. But as we, from the outside into the inside, there has quite different to use the different materials. But in the facade, we can say this is just a decorations. But in the real way, he used the brick, just like this. So, in the complete of the architecture, we cannot say how the bricks work in his architectural process. And another detail is his roof. these scales of the Chinese traditional material to make the roof to defend the water. But in this way, it doesn't work. It's just a material of decorations. So we can say 10 years ago, 10 years later, the little trees growing into the roof. So that is a very contradiction situation in Wang Shu's buildings, in used traditional materials, and then he do this. In 2006, he makes a tiled garden. This is quite a traditional way to use the gilt, not in this way in Xiangshan campus. Yeah, this is his draft, and this is on construction, and this is the final situation. But it is not the space for the people living. Yeah. And this is another famous cases of Wang Shu, Ningbo Museum, historical museum. Yeah, in Ningbo, nearby the Hangzhou and nearby the Shanghai. This is also the typical way Wang Shu used the bricks to decoration his facade. But in the inside, it's also the same types of the material used in Xiangshan campus. This is the typical elevation of facades in Ningbo History Museum. We can say this is the combination by our faster development in the urbanization. So, so many old buildings are destroyed in this process, and the old material, how to use this one, how to use this material is a problem to the contemporary architecture in the sustainable process. So Wang Shu is I think this is the first cases of the contemporary architecture, and we can say he used the bricks as the other divinity, but not the self-identity. He used these materials to show to the West, I use the traditional material in modernity, our modern architecture. But that is a complex situation in Wang Shu's practice. And then I will to introduce the Liu Jiakun. As Professor Louis told me before, Jiakun Liu has known little in Spain, but in China, we think he is very famous, and he's a little older than Wang Shu. He got the Pritzker Architecture Prize in this year. Yeah. And I very like this photos portrait in his official website. Yeah, this is very transformations of him. This is a terrible earthquake in 2008 in Wenchuan, nearby the Chengdu. This is the Liu Jiakun on site after the earthquake. Yeah.
Which year?
Mm-hmm.
Which year?
2008. Yeah. it's a so heavy earthquake in that year. That time I am got my doctorate degree in Tongji University. When the earthquake began, I felt in Shanghai. So this is a very heavy earthquake in our nations. It's made so many people to die. Jiakun Liu is architecture, but he do his architecture practice is so late as his career of the architect. As he mentioned, writing novel and practice architecture are distinct forms of art, and I didn't deliberate seek to combine the two. However, perhaps due to my dual background, there is an inherent connections between them in my work, such as the narrative quality and the pursuit of poetry in my design. This is Jiakun Liu said himself. He very different with Wang Shu. He is a writer, and his friends are a poet, artist, and this is a very famous artist of the Jiakun Liu's friends in Chengdu. Yeah. And this is Jiakun Liu in his youth. After he graduated, he went to Tibet and Xinjiang province to do his early works. And for him, he said, identity is as much about the individual as it is about the collective sense of belonging to the place. Liu Jiakun revisits the Chinese traditional without a nostalgic approach nor ambiguous, but as a springboard or for innovation, a state for the journey. Citizen in part, he creates new architecture that is at once a historical record, a piece of infrastructure, landscape, and a remarkable public space. So I will show some. This is the novel written by Jiakun Liu. And this is the books published in the same time with Wang Shu. Yeah. Now and here. So, almost at the same time, Wang Shu and Jiakun Liu start for the architecture practice. But for Jiakun Liu, this work is his restart. He almost spent almost 10 years to write novels, not as an architect. And in this point, he realized he wants to be an architect. And this is his earlier projects he made by artist, one of his friends. This is almost the earliest, maybe the first studio in Chinese contemporary artists. They themselves studio. This is the very famous artist, Luo Zhongli. Yeah. And we can say this is very typical Le Corbusier. And this is the second, another artist that I mentioned in the first part of Jiakun Liu and his friends. in his studio. We don't say where is the traditional in these buildings, but in the courtyard, there has a typical traditional of the sense in the persons that living here. One trees changed in the 4 seasons. Only one trees. The leaves, the flowers, the light, and the rain. So this is the very abstract spaces in the courtyard, but not in the facade. And this is very famous project of the Jiakun Liu that is to show the statues of Buddha in nearby Chengdu, Yue Luyue Yuan Stone Sculpture Art Museum. In this project, Jiakun Liu start to use bricks, but we can't see in these photos. Why? Why? In this period, Jiakun Liu told us he want to go the narrative and the low tech. So he restart the knowledges that in his young period, the standard of our nation 30 years ago. So he find some skills or techniques to use the bricks as a model to make the concrete. So when he finished the wall, he threw the bricks. Yeah. Because the bricks is cheaper than the steel models, and even cheaper than the wood models. So he to construction with bricks wall, and then he used the wood to make the other side, and then to make the concrete walls. After that, he threw the bricks and threw the wood, remains the concrete walls in these buildings. And almost 6 years ago, he has got a very big project in Chengdu. Yes, design department on a new campus, Sichuan Fine Arts Institute. Oh, sorry, Chongqing. Yeah. This is almostly built in the bricks and the concrete. This one. We can see this is just like a factory. And Jiakun Liu, in this project, he tried to use the different type of the bricks in contemporary industrial situation in China. This is the different ways, different bricks, and different materials in this project. And this is another project in Chengdu. Maybe you can see this one during your trip to China. And I think this is a typical way to use bricks to make huge spaces, memorial spaces in China. It's also a museum. But 2 years ago, 2 years later, the heavy earthquake happened. It interrupted the Jiakun Liu's practice to searching in the contemporary architecture or use the bricks to make modern architecture. He immediately go to the site that the heavy earthquake after. And to try to rebirth breaks in the site of the earthquake. This is Jiakun Liu's introduction of himself practice in birth break. And after the break, clean up the wreckage is an expensive and exhausting task of great difficulty. After sterilization, the rubber can be recycled. And then he adds some typical materials into his rebirth break to reduce the pollutions and to reduce the energies that made the break in the process. So this is the production of his rebirth breaks, and used into lightweight breaks for emerging service after the earthquake. So this is in Venice, 2008, Jiakun Liu's work used by rebirth break, and also used after the earthquake, the residence of the local people. Maybe we also can say the traditional styles in the wood frame systems, and used the rebirth break in the walls. And also, he used the breaks in the memorial of the earthquake. And then, almost 7 years later, he designed this famous building in Chengdu, almost 10 years ago. And this project is very famous after he's got the prize. Yeah. I think this is the used break, but he focused on the density of the city, the local life, daily life in Chengdu's people, and the public space and the private space, how to combine the different ways through architectural ways. And in this project, he used the different ways of the breaks to make the boundaries between the public space and the private space, between the landscape and the architecture. This is the night. So you can go there in night. That's wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. So I think Jiakun Liu is from his individual to the universal, to focus on the topics of the architecture in the contemporary architecture China, is to private writing. His novel is an anti-utopia novel. It's by the honor to the Le Corbusier, the light city, luminous city. Yeah. His novel is focused on these topics, but I think in this project, he defends himself and to think the universal topics of the architecture, the sustainable the environment, the landscape and architecture, the daily life of the people, and the faster developing in the city, how people and how architecture can do to combine these complex situations in one project through architectural way. So, and the third architect is our dean of our School of Architecture, Professor Zhang Pengju. Yeah. He has the same teachers of the master degree with Wang Shu. Yes, Wang Shu and Professor Zhang has same teachers. Yeah. Professor Jianqiang in Southeast University, Nanjing. Yeah. And after his graduate, he go back to his nation. He go back to his homeland, Wuhan, and to do his practice. So, as I mentioned before, our Professor Zhang and our teams faced quite different with Wang Shu or Liu Jiakun. So Professor Zhang proposed the design philosophy of humble construction. Yeah, to combine harmony with nature, heritage continuity, heritage continuity for the different types of the practice. So this is his first book, the second book, and this book this year. Yeah. As I mentioned, that in Mongolia has a very different, so many types of the landscape: the grassland, the desert, the forest, rivers and lakes. Wuhan is just in the middle. From this point to that point, almost 2,000 kilometers. It's very long for us to face the different situations of the landscape, different types, and different climate. So he is the combination point or belt of the civilization of agriculture and the nomadic. This is the grassland. Mongolian yurt, maybe. We will living in the night, maybe. Chaoming and I will try to make it reality. And this is the very typical traditional architecture types. Temples with the religious of the Tibet Buddha, and very original landmarks all around these areas. That I think this is the very quite different between the bricks and the natural materials such as the stones, the bricks, and the wood reconstruction, the building. And this is, yesterday, Chom and I see one in our site. Yeah. In our site, do you find it? Yeah. I think this is the original types in the different parts of the civilizations. Yeah. And Mukden made by wood. So, come to the reality. Our school of architecture. I will mention this one and this one because they use the bricks. And this one did not use the bricks, but new technologies and new materials. When you come here to see. This is our School of Architecture, and for almost 40 years ago, he used as a factory to the students, and in 30 years ago, 30 or 20 years ago, we renovated these buildings by Professor Zhang as our teaching spaces and laboratory spaces and office. Yeah, this is the waste material we rebuilt in the site. And this is the old structures we remained. And this is inside. Yeah. Professor Zhang used almost only one material to divide the different part of the space. Used bricks. So I think the bricks is made not only by the earth, but also some different materials to make the different types we use in the contemporary architecture practice. This is the combinations point of the A buildings and the B buildings. We can see Professor Zhang used the different bricks in the different part of the buildings. And building B is used the same as Liu Jiakun. This is used by rebirth bricks that's made by Professor Zhang. The same way, almost the same way with Liu Jiakun. And we use some old bricks to reuse in the new buildings. And in typical way, we used, especially Professor Zhang used bricks as this way. This is a scientist center for the fishes research in Yellow River. Yeah, nearby the Yellow River. Yes. He used the typical bricks and the stones nearby the rivers. And another place project. This is the traditional village in Mongolia, nearby the Hohhot. The mountains, great mountains, and the little villages. Here, in the renovation of village, we try to make a service center for the people who trip in here. So, Professor Zhang do these buildings in the villages to rethinking how the architecture to respond the landscape and to respond to the context in the traditional villages used by bricks. This is the architecture buildings of this part, faced to the courtyard. We can see this part is for our site. This way is a typical way to defense. I think it's like A Coruña to defense the sunrise, the sun, heavy sun in the afternoon, and to protect people's warm in the cold winter. This is another project of Professor Zhang. It's a heritage that's a huge city built in the almost 1,200 years ago in Beiwei dynasty. This is the old Great Wall, part of the Great Wall, and the part of the city wall used by the historical type of the bricks. That is the only part on the site. And Professor Zhang, to make his buildings in the earth, to protect the big site heritage of the old cities, and to rebuild tombs 2,000 years ago found in the site. Han Dynasty, 2,000 years. So in this project, there has different types of the historical layers in the new buildings in contemporary practice of Professor Zhang's work. Another project, a museum. This is a branch river of the Huanghe, a yellow river. And he flowed through the cities to divide the cities in the different parts. But local people, use these ways to the mountain. But on the site, there is no way to combine the natural landscape to here. Professor Zhang, to make a way to climbing the mountains and to go to the old Great Wall, part of the Great Wall, 2,000 years before, to combine the landscape, the historical heritage, and the daily life of the peoples living in the city. This is another project in the desert to use the local material and the low tech and the construction by the local people, and to try to rethinking the climate influence through the building. Yeah. This is another project. This is turn directions of the Yellow River. Yeah. This one. To combine the natural landscape through architectural way to got the skins. This way. This way. This is the final project. Yeah, last. Maybe we will go to there. Emily already go there. Yeah, yeah, with Cristobal. Yeah, yeah, yeah. This one is also in typical villages of Hohhot nearby. Yes, almost 30 minutes from our university to this space. Yeah. This is the village, and this is the project. And the village is developing so fast, so they destroyed so many old buildings, and to rebuild new buildings. They think that is the modernity, but Professor Zhang to collection the bricks. That's the villages to throw everywhere, the old bricks, and reuse and reorganize in these buildings to create. This is because of the bricks is the villages used. They know how to make them in traditional ways. Professor Zhang on site, work on site to chatting with the villages and to find some new ways to combine the space in villages. Sorry, this is fine. And to respond to the climate in the particular site. To respond to the religious and the public. The ceremony, lucky tree in this site. So I think Professor Zhang is to the natural way to respond to the cultural situations, quite different situations in the Mongolia. And this is my conclusion. Quickly. In China contemporary architecture, not these three, only these three architects to use the bricks. There has so many architects to use the bricks to make the contemporary or modernity in our architectural practice. This is a quite different way to use. And why? Why they use the bricks? Is the traditional or it's a modern? So I think this is the two main topics to rethinking this phenomenon in architecture in contemporary China. The first one is the material systems. The other one is architectural ontology. So the material of bricks is the key to understanding contemporary architecture. Thank you.